Hey there, everybody. Great to see you again back into our education portal. What we have today is the expert that I keep talking to about multifamily real estate on the brokerage side of things. Now, for me, I've found a lot of comfort in reaching out to a woman. I'm also in Crew Dallas, which is commercial real estate women, and that's been a great way for me to feel comfortable and get responses and be able to kind of get some traction in finding multifamily deals or opportunities. Now, I'm going to let Robin Francis Baker, who we have today, talk a little bit about what she does and introduce herself because I won't do her justice.
Well, thank you, Kaylee. Robin Francis Baker, like you said, with the SBN 20 Advisors. I've been in the brokerage community for about 6 years, since 2014. I specialize in multifamily and office sales. I'm in Crew Fort Worth. I was on the board of directors for the last 2 years. Crew is a great organization. They're very helpful, with connecting and being resources to each other. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. So your office, you said, is in Fort Worth?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I like Fort Worth. Do you live in Fort Worth too?
No, I do not. I live out in Mansfield.
Okay. Oh, that's right. That's right. How long is that drive?
It's about 20 minutes. Not too bad.
Okay, not too bad. Cool. I don't spend enough time in Fort Worth, and I'd like to spend more time there. Now that there's some action happening downtown, kind of. And there's a drive-in movie theater, and there's like the Panther Creek Pavilion. And anyway, sorry not to squirrel too much, but but regardless, if you guys are listening to this or watching this, Fort Worth, if you're not from Texas, is an area of DFW, Dallas, Fort Worth. It's a little bit, I would say, more conservative. I would say that there's areas in DFW in the Fort Worth side that are coming up still. A lot of Dallas has been kind of like picked over when it comes to multifamily. There's still some good things that pop up here and there, but it's not often. But, and you can always tell us what your opinion on this is, but I see a lot of not a lot, but I see some opportunities in HEB, which is Hearst, Euless, Bedford, between Dallas, Fort Worth, kind of going up towards Arlington, North Richland Hills, like kind of like that area of Fort Worth. And there's, low crime. I like that area a lot. So if there's more areas of Fort Worth that you know about, we'd love to hear about that. You're obviously the expert. And or of Dallas Fort Worth Dallas that maybe up and coming that people aren't paying attention to.
Well, Fort Worth has a lot of good opportunities for the B and C class properties. There's several that are need some additional work, so there's a lot of value add that can be done to them. A lot of investors do focus more on the Dallas side because that's what's the most known. But so that does leave Fort Worth to be more of an opportunity for those who kind of know the area more. And that there's a lot of properties that are available for that product type.
Yeah. Now, as a broker, so people that are listening or watching this right now, like for example, I'm a broker, but I'm a broker in residential real estate. So that's something that I actually don't focus too much on. I have a very small team and they kind of do their own thing is how that works. But when it comes to commercial real estate, I'm not a commercial broker. And there's a lot that I don't know, about how the offer process works. That's all been stuff I had to learn, very different than single family. Things in the industry of multifamily versus single, where you've got people that are putting in multiple offers. You've got people that are very competitive. There's a thing called hard money. I mean, it's a very different world. So I guess, Robin, from your perspective on the multifamily side, when you're making offers, or like I just got off the phone with somebody who they're having trouble, they're in an LOI process. And then now the sellers, they had an agreed LOI. The seller's now coming back, want hard money. What are some good strategies for success when it comes to the offer process?
So the LOI, or letter of intent, is a non-binding agreement between the buyer and the seller. It's basically the prequel to an actual contract between the two parties. So you can make amendments for the LOI. Like you said, the seller does come back if they get a lot of good offers, and they continue to get offers on the property, even if the deadline for offers has ended, they will a lot of times still get offers. So they want to, sometimes they will honor that agreement, but asking you to put up the hard money or money that is non-refundable, just to ensure that you are a qualified buyer.
So really that's the reason. So I was like, well, what would be the reason someone would want hard money. Could you expand on what exactly hard money means? Like hard money, you said non-refundable, but what day does it go non-refundable? Yeah.
So the date that that hard money goes non-refundable is really dependent upon the contract. Some contracts you can, if you want to be a really strong candidate, you can have hard money go hard day one. You can have it go hard after your inspection or due diligence period. It's really up to you and the seller. The right thing about commercial real estate is the contract, we have a template that we can use, but pretty much you can negotiate any part of the contract and make it how you want for your specific situation.
Cool. Now, why would somebody see? I just learned something. Why would somebody put hard money after due diligence? Is it a short due diligence or like what?
It's more to protect the buyer, so that way they could decide if they want to go forward with the property. It's kind of like with residential real estate, where you have a contract period. You can terminate within usually 7 days. If something comes up in the inspection period that you don't like, so you usually have like $100 that goes back, or a small portion that the seller gets to keep for consideration in order to do the inspection, and then the buyer gets that short period of time to do all the inspections and then decide, do I want to move forward with this property?
Yeah. Absolutely. So that was a shocker. And even honestly, when I'm dealing with people that I know that have been in multifamily for a long time, and maybe they just kind of have been out of the game lately, they've been more buying resorts or different other things. They understand the whole process, negotiations, all that stuff, but their minds are blown. Like three older men that I've talked to, they're like, don't overpay for something. Don't, what is this hard money stuff? What is this like non-contingency or no financing contingency? Like they're just out of the game for a while, and it's changed quite a bit, and it kind of is what it is to be competitive. And I've learned that because like most of the time when I get into an offer, even when it's accepted, there's always kind of some kind of point in time where you kind of need to bite the bullet. Like nothing's ever going to be perfect where you're just going to get everything that you ask for, or even when you think you got everything you asked for because your LOI was accepted, even later there's renegotiation and stuff like that where you're like, man, that's going to be another 100K and you weren't expecting it. So it's definitely a different world. So hard money was something that was hard for me to get over. I'm over it, but as far as the due diligence process, so whenever you're coming from residential real estate to commercial real estate, what's the difference between the two?
So in residential, you typically just have a home inspection done, and then if you want to, you can go further with HVAC inspection, roof inspection, those kind of. If something comes up in the inspection report that is concerning, you can get further ones. For commercial real estate, you usually want to also do, including inspecting the building, you want to do environmental inspections, or at least have environmental reports to show that the environmentals are clean. There hasn't been any previous hazardous materials on the properties, and that's usually more of a concern for other property types, but it can be a concern with multifamily as well, which is why typically you just get one that's already been done in the past. So the due diligence period, you just want to kind of inspect the property, inspect the roofs, and decide what the condition of the property is. Was it what you expected it to be? Because most properties are considered as is condition. So you want to see that if that's something you want to invest your more money into, or you can try to negotiate with the seller to get some inspections or repair, or some repairs done.
Now, how should that be handled? Because, for example, it's different again in this word called retrading. Can you explain what that means and how that could either ruin a deal or turn someone off, or how to approach that?
So are you talking about the inspection period, or?
So, yes.
Okay, so for the inspection period, um, there's several things you can do. If say the roof needs repair, a lot of times if things you want to go through the current insurance that the seller has to get that repaired before you take ownership of the property. Um, if it's something less minor, then you can just go ahead and leave it as is, as if it's functioning, because a lot of times sellers do not want to invest more money into a property that they're soon no longer going to be owning. So there's a lot of some friction between the buyer and the seller in determining who is going to do the repairs and when. A lot of times you can just do a escrow account or some type of agreement in order to get some money paid for by the seller, and just instead of the seller doing the actual work.
Can you expand on what you mean by an escrow account for that purpose?
So an escrow account is usually money that's put in, set aside, usually by the title insurance company. Um, they just held. It's usually an interest-bearing account, um, and so it's that way the seller can't touch it and the buyer can't touch it until certain conditions are met. Sometimes if it's a repair, say a fence needs to be repaired that's along the property, the seller can put a certain amount of money in there, and then once it's repaired, then that can be released back to the seller. And if it doesn't get repaired by the time the contract ends, then it goes to the buyer. So it just depends on what you want to say in the contract.
Now, as far as due diligence goes, what would you think, or what have you seen over the last, over the years of experience you've had? What is a normal or typical due diligence time period? What is unreasonable, and what is probably impossible to get things done under?
So I've seen a lot of different ones. It depends on the size of the property. The smaller properties, you can have a shorter due diligence period. Um, I've seen it, and then if you have land deals, it can be up to 2 years. For a typical multifamily, it's usually 45 days. At 60 days is normal. Of course, with the way things change all the time, especially with current situation, um, it's changing constantly. So I say 30 days is kind of a short one. Anything less than that, usually you're not. It's harder to do a full due diligence process on the property. Just trying to
Yeah.
navigate everyone together.
Yeah, true. I mean, it depends on kind of your resources and all that kind of stuff. So when I've asked for, I didn't even know you could do this till, I don't know, like months ago or something, but an early access agreement, where it's kind of like, okay, we just need a peak for a certain amount of time. It could be really short. It could be 5 days. It could be a variety of things, but just enough time to make sure, for example, you can get someone there to snake the plumbing. That could be a huge costly repair, like 100K per building, depending on what you're working with. Just the big things, inspect the foundation, inspect that, the wiring, check for, anyway, stuff that, could be very expensive. So that's not the full due diligence, but just enough to really look at the large costs and make sure that that won't be something that you have to retrade. So I didn't even know that you could do an EAA or early access agreement until last year. But do you see that often on contracts or LOIs?
Actually, no, I don't usually see early access agreements. I might see, I have seen before where a buyer wanted to see the leasing agreements for the tenants before the due diligence period began. But that again is rare. So just like I said before, each contract you can do, you can make it fit what your custom needs. And that's one of the great things that we have available to us.
Cool. So the contract part, I'm just kind of blown away by how creative you can be. Like you said, is pretty much kind of like what you want or what you can create. Now, what would be a good resource for somebody who is like, how do I know all my options? How do I know what all I could ask for possibly in the universe? Like, what would you suggest?
Well, I would definitely suggest a commercial real estate broker who is experienced in multifamily. Um, so big difference between residential and commercial. Residential tends to be, you might be geographical experts, where multifamily, or sorry, commercial, you need to be property type specific. Because there's just so many different property types for commercial, and so much goes into each property type. It makes it more difficult to, if you're a generalist, to understand each one, even if you are a geographic specialist. So having
Right.
someone that knows the ins and outs of multifamily and does that on a day-to-day basis is very beneficial.
Wow. Yeah, you're exactly right. So usually when you're working with the broker, say they're under SVN, and does SVN have certain people that only do A class assets in multifamily, only B, like that kind of thing?
So each office for SBN and a lot of other large brokerage groups are independently owned and operated. So each office breaks it up differently. My office, I am one of there's only two of us that do multifamily, myself and a new gentleman. Um, and then other companies, sometimes they just focus just on multifamily, or some of them have teams. So it's going to be different across all companies and for each broker.
Okay. Very cool. So you just kind of, that's a brokerage uh, conversation. Now, here's something that I think a lot of people in general struggle with, but I work with a lot of women, so that's my exposure, is that, when it comes to hey, we need to start reaching out to brokers. And that's the only way you're going to start getting involved with deals that are available or before they're available, or whatever. And I've got a couple ladies that are intimidated because they're afraid to not know certain terminology and give it away that they're a newbie. They don't want to be texting like what are kind of like good rules of thumb to follow to build a good relationship with a commercial multifamily broker, but not take up too much of their time, or like what's a good, yeah.
So I know for me, I'm pretty open to helping people out, either fellow brokers or clients. I'm just kind of helping them learn more information. Um, I try to also make sure I return phone calls, which I know that's the biggest issue that most people have with brokers is them not responding to their uh, emails or phone calls. So it's so a lot of times you do reach out to them, you may or may not get a response back, and it has nothing to do uh, with your expertise or your knowledge. It's just sometimes the broker just doesn't have the time or the bandwidth in order to contact them back. But if you go through organizations such as Crew, um, they always say the Crew, there's never a cold call. So you can call that person, and they are obligated to contact you back and to answer your questions and help you out, whether you're experienced or you're inexperienced. So that I always find that Crew has been a really excellent resource.
Yeah, it has been, and you have been amazingly responsive. That's like I mentioned earlier that I've had some difficulty with people that I've even bought stuff from. I'm like, what the, call me back, and it's something where you're trying to kind of get moving on something so you can get your offer ready, so you have enough information. And anyway, luckily sometimes people have an assistant, or they have like a bunch of folders worth of information. You can just go there. You don't necessarily have to bug them. But when it comes to like having a relationship with a broker, one thing, when they start finding out who to contact, most of the time people have to start usually with either getting on the list from someone else who's already on the list, or and list meaning like new offerings that come up available. Or not offerings, sorry, listings that come available. And most of the people, though, they start poking around online. They start on like LoopNet, and they start going on LoopNet, and then they go to the brokers that are listing things on LoopNet. How do you feel about LoopNet and either the reliability of it slash the quality of possible relationships that you're getting by reaching out to those brokers? Even if that deal they have listed isn't good for you, how do you feel about that process?
So LoopNet is owned by a group called CoStar, which we brokers tend to use quite a bit. Um, that information can be old a lot of times. It depends on how good that broker and their administrative background is, if how much they will update the information on CoStar or slash LoopNet. So sometimes the properties don't get taken down, even though they've been closed for months or years. And sometimes the information within CoStar and LoopNet is just incorrect, period. So you can reach out to those brokers, but if they don't have that list anymore, I've noticed that a lot of those brokers will not even respond. I've had to call multiple times and email multiple times and basically annoy the broker in order for them to give me a call back, just so they can let me know that that property was sold a year ago. Um, so it's just, you can reach out to them, but um, I would look. I think the best way to reach a broker is through maybe some of your relationships. Title company, they'll let you know some of the brokers they would like to work with. Um, Engineers, developers. I mean, there's all sorts of ways you can connect with brokers. It's just find someone you can do on social media. See who's active on social media and who's pretty responsive, and that's willing to give information. That's another great resource.
Yeah. Can you take me through the process? So, a lot of people, for example, in single family real estate, when they're dealing with a broker or a agent, the agent usually has one side of the transaction, or one side of the transaction or the other is typically how it goes. Now, sometimes, and they always like coach you to try to get both. You know what I mean? They always try to coach you to like whatever. My first experience in multifamily was that we had somebody that did the listing, and then we never had a buyer's agent. And then I've also had a situation where there's a buyer's agent. What is the best for a broker? What situation is usually the best for the person that you're in contact with?
So
Yeah.
each company does it a little bit differently. There are some companies that keep everything in-house for a period of time, and then if they can't find a buyer for it, then they'll go further out within their own company. And then if they still can't find a buyer, then they will broadcast it to the wider commercial real estate community. Um, I know for what SBN does, we do tips, and that also depends on the offices. My office, we tend to try to be listing brokers first, and then if a buyer comes along that's unrepresented and they are wanting to be represented by us, we tend to do an intermediary agreement and then assign someone else within our brokerage to that buyer. So the agents aren't necessarily double ending the deal, but the brokerage is.
Mm-hmm.
But I always do try to emphasize to buyers to get a buyer broker, something that protects their interests, because that listing broker, their main interest is the client, that is the seller.
Oh yeah.
So the buyer to them is just someone that's helping them out, helping them seal the deal for their seller.
Yeah, where the buyer's just more money, more money. Like, give me more money. No one's gonna tell you any different. Yeah, yeah. I learned that on my first transaction too, because I was blown away. You know, we got under contract for a certain price, then even tried to change his mind again. I was like, dude, we already we negotiated the freaking contract. What? But you know, it's kind of like the Wild West, you know, when it comes to stuff in commercial real estate. Now, when it comes to like presenting offers, for example, can you clarify this for us? Normally, I don't know if it's a TREC rule, Texas Real Estate Commission rule, or if it's, I forget what it is exactly, but the rule on the residential side is that, for example, if you have a seller who needs offers and you have a bunch of offers coming in, um, what um, what would be, there we go. What would be I forgot what I was even saying. What would be the process like for someone that had multiple offers? But like you mentioned, normally you're supposed to bring them all at once. So at least it's not saying, okay, just look at this, just look at this. You bring them at once. Is that still the same thing? You have to bring them all at once?
So according to the Texas Real Estate Commission, which we're TREC, if there are offers presented to the seller as a broker, I have to present them to my seller. Unless the seller says, do not bring me anything under X amount, then at that point I can say, well, my seller won't even look at it. But as a real estate agent, I am obligated to present all offers to my seller, no matter even if they're a ridiculous amount. So
Yeah. And then you did mention that sometimes you have offers after there's maybe he's even gone, I like this one the best, I think I want to move forward with this one, and then the next day after call to offers, you know, then there's another one. Does that now become the backup offer, or is that kind of like, you know, we're going to then reach back out to those two people and see how much more sweet we can get the deal? Like, how does that work?
it really depends on the seller. If the seller and the situation. So if the seller has already made an agreement with a buyer, and then they need to honor that agreement. And I always counsel my sellers to honor their agreements, even if it's a non-binding agreement. If nothing has been negotiated yet, and they're not going, and there's nothing concrete, then they can take another offer if they choose to. That even if it's received after the call to offer, because the call to offer is just something that agents and sellers put into place just to put a deadline on the property, especially for multifamily when you can get 21 offers on one property.
So if I was a seller in multifamily real estate and my broker was to ask me, okay, how do you want to structure selling this property? Do you want to automatically pick a call to offers date, or do you want to just put it out there as market price, or do you want to pick a price? Like, what is the difference between all that stuff?
So I know a lot of people do the market price, especially I think during this time when the prices are fluctuating, that might be something that might be beneficial. But I know typically what I do, I typically do put a price on my listings, something that I feel that is reasonable for a buyer that will entice buyers. Sometimes you get that price, sometimes you get more, sometimes you get a little bit less. And so I know some people choose the market price just to see what's the most you can get. But it is difficult for some people, some buyers won't even look at those properties. So you have to weigh that that you might be turning away some buyers because you are not pricing it, and they don't know if it's within their price range or not.
Interesting. I never thought about that because, you know, just takes some math to figure it out. But again, you know, no one likes being the seller. And like I always say, when I'm offering something that's lower than I'd like to, because again, I always try to reach out to the other party because multifamily is a small world. Hey, I've got this offer, but I don't want to offend your seller. So you don't have to give it to them if this is way off, you know, but this is just how the business is currently operating and what it's valued at. So this is what I can pay. So I try to use that too, to just to not like ruin that relationship. But that's interesting that you say that. I never thought about the fact that someone may just pass up properties because there's no price, because I see the market or MKT all the time, you know, and I couldn't imagine seeing those and being like, nah, because like that's all of them. Like, all the time. So it's nice sometimes when there's actually a price. Now, one thing I use or term I use when I call the broker to ask them on a market price is whisper price. What is the whisper price? What does that mean, and what kind of variation could that have with reality of what the actual expectations of the seller are?
Right. So whisper prices are typically for the non-price properties, the market price properties. So that's just basically it's and not really advertising what the seller wants instead of where list price is doing the same thing. So it's just kind of making people come and ask you and showing that they're interested in what the whisper or the technical price the seller wants. So sometimes the seller will say, I won't accept below this amount and say, give me this amount. But unless the seller tells the agent that you can give that information to buyers, they can't disclose that information. So the whisper price is more usually something that they would like to aspire to, just like a listing price.
Okay, okay. And then I guess the last question I can think of right now, besides one for you personally, is just when it comes to when it comes to somebody that is looking for properties, and they're, you know, so for example, how important is it to be super specific when it comes to, like, you know, you're trying to communicate with a broker. Okay, so I see this listing and it maybe doesn't work for us, but you can't just say that. Like, what kind of things do you need to be sharing with your broker so they can get you the best fit for you, so you're not wasting the broker's time and you're also not wasting your time?
So you do need to be as specific as possible. If you're too broad, then you will get hundreds of results sometimes, depending on the product type and depending on kind of how things are. It's like usually in the past several years, there's been a shortage of listings for multifamily, so you could be more broad. Um, but if properties are more readily available for sale, then you need to be more specific to just narrow down information. So, and your broker will give you things outside of what you requested, because I've found that a lot of times that buyers will decide, okay, well, this is an exception to the rule that I gave you, so I do want to look at this type of property. So just keep that in mind as well. They will try to find stuff that you might be interested in as well.
So it's important to know things like what your market area is. You know, what for me, I say, okay, what metropolitan or MSA areas that I like. You know, even down to the zip code, if you know exactly what you really like. And then, you know, obviously there's so many different classes, knowing your class range that you like, knowing what kind of your expected, not necessarily return profile, but for me, I put in there what percentage of market rent, you know, I want to be at. Do I need it? Am I okay with it basically being something that someone's already renovated and I just want to sit on something, so it's, you know, close to market rent's fine, or something that someone's never messed with and so I have opportunity there, or whatever, you know, it's there's something for everybody. But those are things that I try to be pretty clear about, even if it won't ruin, like you said, there's so much, there's a limit on multifamily availability specifically. So I used to say stuff like, you know, pitched roofs or like no chiller, and I'm like, well, not necessarily. Like I could definitely budge on those things. So while it's nice to have, it's when it's competitive, you got to kind of, again, you can't have your cake and eat it too all the time. So
And
and
definitely
go ahead.
find a multifamily broker with the size you want, like how many units,
Yeah,
as well.
there we go. There's another thing. Um, what is something that someone might use as a criteria that you just think is like unrealistic and a waste of time?
Um, haven't come across anything that's been unrealistic or waste of time. Well, I guess I have, but usually they want value add, but a high class, like a A class or sometimes even a B class in a very hot market, and then that they don't want to pay very much for it at all. You know, they want to pay well below market for a very sought after product that's just not available. So that's the only time that I typically kind of turn those people away.
You kind of have to budge on something, you know? Yeah.
I do try to educate them before I just send them on the way.
Yeah, that's great of you. And you've been awesome being able to work with you. Now, I've got one question for you. So far in the last 6 years, what has been your biggest lesson and your biggest win?
See, my biggest lesson has been get everything in writing. These are contracts, so you need to make sure that any type of deal that's going to be done needs to be written down on either by an attorney that writing the contract or by using a form that the broker can use, like a TAR, Texas Association of Realtors form, or a Texas Realtors Association commission form. So those are because people will back out if they feel like they can find another deal better somewhere else, either the seller or the buyer. So it's best to have everything in writing and signed by both parties. And for our biggest win, um, let's see. I always feel good when I've helped my clients. And that's usually my biggest win for me, is getting that good feeling from helping them achieve their goals, either by selling the property for whatever reason, or for helping them purchase a property that's kind of helps the portfolio.
Yeah, and then I hope that whenever you've helped somebody purchase a property, that hopefully again that relationship is very key. That like for me, that's probably my 100% rule. If somebody helped sell something or help me buy something, that they'll be involved when I resell it again after I've done my work, because obviously they know the property super well. So when it comes to how it was, where it went to, where it's going to go from, they understand the story. Yeah, that's just been something that my mentors have said, just make it easy and have somebody that knows the property really well. So definitely, that's hopefully another win too, is staying kind of with those people you've worked with.
Absolutely.
Well, Robin, that gets us to about 34 minutes or so. So how can our audience get a hold of you if they're looking for a commercial property? Is it just Dallas Fort Worth that you cover?
I do a little bit outside of Dallas Fort Worth, but I mainly do the DFW area. I'll do then like an hour or so outside of Dallas Fort Worth.
Okay. How can our listeners and watchers get a hold of you if they're looking in that area?
So you have this little QR tag up here.
Oh, cool.
My Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email, and website. So I have all my contact information through that QR code.
What are you on Instagram? I'm going to go follow you after this.
I don't remember my one off the top of my head because I have two. One's personal, one's business. So
Okay. I'll follow both. Okay, cool. Well, Robin, I really appreciate you getting on here with us today and being able to hopefully let our audience know a little bit more about how the process of an offering, or not an offering, an offer, and negotiations, and then also, hopefully taking away the scary part of reaching out to a broker. I think a lot of people just like never get started. And again, getting involved, like you said, with Crew, commercial real estate women, I have seen just like so much. I mean, as far as resources for brokerage, resources for designers that are going to redo our front office. I mean, everything you can think of, cost segregation engineers. I mean, everybody, all the smart women in commercial real estate are in Crew. So that's a great way to get around like-minded individuals in your industry. And then especially if you're a woman, and they do, I believe, have men come into the organization as well. But yeah, it's cool. Commercial real estate women is really awesome. So if you want to get into there, or it's been demystified, Robin has an Instagram, she's a normal person. We can reach out to brokers, they're not like scary people, and then be able to achieve our goals. So thank you, Robin, so much for joining us today and for explaining all of this to our audience, and we'll be in touch soon.
all right, thanks, Kaylee.
Thank you.